Okay, we'll today, lots of things to do. First, we have to finish up chapter 7. Then, the first segment, chapter 7. Chapter 7 has a lot of information. So, in the first segment, we finish up chapter 7. Then, second segment, chapter 8. And I have PowerPoints, which I have not used. Chapter 7, chapter 8 PowerPoints will be shared with Lee Kyung-hwa. So Lee Kyung-hwa will post it somewhere, PowerPoints. Now, Kim Yoo-jin, we are still on international law. Okay, international law. Many say that international law is different from national law, right? It's same law, but the way it works, particularly the enforcement mechanism, is very different. Can you elaborate a little bit the difference between national law and international law? Okay, let me ask you then. National law, okay, national law. We have a body of national law, right? Then when we comply with those national laws, we know that we're going to be in trouble if we violate some of these national laws, right? How do we get these national laws? I mean, how are these national laws? How do these national laws become laws? Are they declared by the government? The Korean president declares that, beyond such and such day, this law is something that you have to, right, follow. Is that what we get? Is that how we get these national laws? Or national laws should be proposed by the administration, including president. Then maybe Congress, right? Congress should deliberate on it and pass it. Right? Congress should pass it, right? That's the procedure, right? That's the procedure. Then maybe it'll be announced, right? In due course, then we know those are laws, right? But how about international laws? International laws become laws through this kind of process. 장희라, what kind of procedures international laws go through in becoming a law? Let me ask you more directly. We have the UN, right? Does the UN pass these laws? Like, for instance, the Security Council, they release many resolutions, right? Are these resolutions law? Or any resolutions passed through General Assembly? Are these laws? Resolutions passed through Security Council, General Assembly? 조영진, General Assembly passed some laws, international laws? Are these laws? No, right? Those resolutions passed by Security Council, General Assembly, they are not laws. Okay? Then the question arises, 권세원. Then how to get these international laws? How come do we get these international laws? If not the UN, if not the Security Council, we are talking about the sources of international law. The sources of international law. There are several sources of international laws. And custom. Custom. Some international laws are customary. Okay? They follow because we have done that for a long, long time as a tradition. That's how other people do. Okay? That has become sort of a custom. Some international laws are just customary. Okay? So custom is one of the important sources of international law. And general principles also serve as a source of international law. And finally, scholarship. Okay, scholarship. Legal scholarship. Things that scholars and judges have studied. Okay, important pieces that scholars, judges have studied, they become laws over time. So these are 4 sources of international laws. In a nutshell, national laws, okay, national laws depends on the authority of the central government. Okay? Laws at a national level comes down from the central government. Okay? The difference in the case of international law is that there's nothing, right? That there's nothing like central authority. Okay? No central authority, even the United Nations, they don't give down any laws. Okay? So international laws arise out of 3 sources. I mean, there are four tangible sources, but in general, there are 3 important bases of international law. Reciprocity. Okay, reciprocity. Collective action and norms. This is another way of putting how international laws arise. You know, this principle of reciprocity is repeated again and again. Okay, reciprocity. International law is not like a authority and power top down. Okay, international law is about reciprocity. Okay, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This type of interaction that gives birth to international law. Now, when states have problems, okay, with other states, okay, you want to resolve these disputes, okay, and you want to bring this to some legal framework, okay, these grievances, okay, then what kind of legal framework can we resort to? Do we have any court for international disputes? There are 2 courts. Okay, there are 2 courts internationally. You should not be confused. One is ICJ. Okay, the other one ICC. ICJ. The other one ICC. ICJ, International Court of Justice, which is part of the UN. Is ICC part of the UN? No. ICJ is part of the UN system. Okay? It's also called World Court. World Court. Can individuals for ICJ, can individuals bring cases to ICJ? No. Only governments. Okay? Only states bring cases to ICJ. Individuals, ICC. Okay? ICC, individuals can. Only states, not individuals, or even companies for ICJ. Can the Security Council take the case to ICJ? Yes. Security Council? Yes. General Assembly? Yes. They can request opinions of judges at the World Court on some issues of international significance. Talking about the structure of the World Court, how many judges? The panel of 15 judges at the World Court. 15 judges. 5 of them are re-elected every 3 years. 5 of them are re-elected every 3 years. Majority vote at the Security Council and the General Assembly. Okay? Where is that court located? Hague, Netherlands. It's in the Netherlands. Permanent members of the Security Council, at least one judge they represent. At least one judge from every permanent Security Council member. In terms of track record of the World Court, do you think the World Court is really important, powerful, they can decide on some international issues really? Do you think so? The World Court, the importance of World Court. Is it really powerful? Or World Court, yes, it's a good thing for us to have it, but most of power only on the paper. It's not that powerful, right? There are weaknesses. There are weaknesses, a lot of weaknesses to the World Court. There are limits. There are limits to the power the World Court wills. Right? There are limits. Right? That's the nature of international law. Right? Even if they hand down some decisions, right? But then should every country comply with that? Sometimes there are ways they can get away with it, right? There are ways, right? There are ways that countries can get away with. That's the limits to international law. That's the limits to the World Court. Particularly powerful countries, including the United States. Okay? That tool the powerful countries have is called the optional clause, right? Optional clause, by which these powerful countries can get away with some of the decisions by the World Court. But on the other hand, there are some important decisions made by the World Court, right? Some good things, right? But in general, very limited, not very much cases, not very many cases, in fact, so far, right? Which means that the countries, particularly the powerful countries, they don't take it seriously. They don't take the World Court seriously. Page 261. So here, the debate, page 261, right above the section Law and Sovereignty, the section, despite the paragraph that begins with, despite the continued importance of national court systems in international legal affairs and the lack of enforcement powers of the World Court. This is what I talked about, right? Still, in terms of enforcement, national laws take precedence over international law, right? That's what it means. National laws take precedence over international law. It would be wrong to conclude that state sovereignty is supreme and international law important, right? This kind of extreme view is nevertheless wrong, misplaced. So the best thing we could do is have a balance of sovereignty and law exist. This is a more balanced view, okay? Despite all these weaknesses and precedence of national law, but still balance should be made between sovereignty and international law. This is wishful thinking, probably, right? But over time, particularly recently, I think the importance of international law gain in importance. Like, for instance, human rights issues, right? I think sovereignty, in some cases, is subject to international law. Right? In that sense, I think he's right. The author of this textbook is right. A balance is being made, probably, between sovereignty and international law. Now, the final section. Having covered all these, okay, the last section we have to study is to look at the kinds of different bodies of international law. This textbook goes over 3 different bodies of international law. One is law of diplomacy, okay? Those laws that regulate diplomacy, diplomatic interactions, okay? Probably these laws are something that has been most developed, laws of diplomacy, and longest standing tradition. Second, we have laws of war, okay? And finally, most important were human rights law, okay? Laws that govern human rights issues. Okay, what are the rules and principles that govern diplomacy today? There are some important rules and regulations that have been around for a long, long time. But the bedrock of international law is respect for diplomats, okay? Respect and independence for diplomats, okay? This is the bedrock assumption. The bedrock assumption of diplomatic law, international diplomatic law, is to respect the rights of diplomats. And it says the standards and principles of behavior, diplomatic behavior, are spelled out in detail and apply universally. Almost every country, okay, almost every country complies with these laws that govern diplomacy, right? At least I think, right, I think the reason why they take this issue first, diplomatic law, is that almost every country, at least, they respect these diplomatic laws. Okay, almost every country. So it is applied universally, okay, and is taken seriously. Okay. The exception is the issue that is raising in DC now and also globally. The U.S. government, they put some the spying machine in every, right, to eavesdrop on global leaders. The U.S. was spying on these leaders, right? Does that fit this diplomatic law? I'm not sure. I mean, again, when this issue rose, what the first reaction from the U.S. government is that NSA, the organization NSA, we learned in the textbook, NSA is in charge of all this intelligence gathering, right? What they said is that, I mean, they were doing what they gotta do. I mean, domestic, American national intelligence, right? But in terms of international law, right? I think they were clearly violating some laws. I don't know what specific law they are violating, but at least, they didn't show some respect for diplomats or the leaders of different governments. So I think it's a flagrant violation of some customs and some laws. I don't know whether there are really laws, but at least they were violating some customs, right? When you invite presidents from different countries, you put some machine in that person's hotel room, right? It's not a respect, right? So that is one of the issues today. So these diplomatic laws have stipulations on many different, aspects of diplomacy. Right. The process of accreditation, when you appoint ambassadors, right? The process of, the appointment process, right? Accreditation process, that are all in the book, right? So the process of diplomatic recognition, diplomatic immunity. Diplomats enjoy diplomatic immunity. Okay? But the current trend regarding the law of diplomacy is that the law of diplomacy is repeatedly violated, okay, due to changes in international affairs, particularly changes such as terrorism. Okay. Now, let's talk about the laws of war. On this one, I can ask some questions. the textbook says the law of diplomacy is, like I said, is well developed, okay, as a body of international law. And the other body of law that is most developed is, he says, the law of war, okay, the law of war. And he says the laws concerning war are divided into two things. First, laws of war. Okay, laws of war. In other words, laws of war regulates when war is permissible. When war is permissible. This is an interesting area. Legally speaking, when is war permissible under international law? Right? When is war possible, permissible, legally permissible? So it says the laws of war, most of the debate of the laws of war is about this question. When is war legally possible? Okay? In other words, when can a country attack another country? On what basis? On what legal ground? Okay, like for instance, the United States attacked the Iraqi territory, right? Is it permissible legally? On what basis? Right? Under what circumstances? That debate, right? So how does international law approach this kind of issues? Okay, that's the question here. Okay, when is it possible a country can attack another country? To get to the bottom of that, I think we have to make sure that there must be some aggression, right? There must be some aggression first. So then we have to define aggression, whether or not there was aggression first. Okay, because there is no, legally speaking, in the tradition of international law, there is no just war. There is no just war. Am I right? Okay, legally speaking, international law distinguishes two different types of wars. There are just wars, okay, which are legal, and there are wars of aggression. Maybe this is a better way of putting it, right? Right. There are just wars, but on the other hand, there are wars of aggression, which are illegal. Wars of aggression is illegal, and just war is legal. But what constitutes just, that's a problematic. What constitutes just war is problematic, right? That's the essence of the debate. What constitutes? Under what circumstances? So, like I said, this kind of law, this kind of debate grows out of centuries old debate, literature. Hundreds of years, scholars have debated this issue. Okay, what is just war? What is, illegal war? What is legal war? Whether or not there is a legal war, right? And The next page has a good elaboration. Aggression, okay? First, we need to define what constitutes aggression, okay? When you do aggression, you have the right to attack, right? The aggression is defined by a violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's what constitutes aggression. Put differently, aggression refers to a state's use of force. Aggression refers to a state's use of force or imminent threat to do so against another state's territory or sovereignty. So, just war, okay? You can have a war legally when it is a response to this aggression, okay? So responses can include like a repelling the attack itself, okay? Repelling this aggressive attack and punishing the aggressor. So responses to this kind of aggression is the only permissible use of military force, okay? According to just war doctrine. This will come up again in the human rights section, but the last paragraph, let's read the last paragraph here. These are the definitions that have been around for a long, long time, but this kind of just war doctrine is undergoing some changes due to changing nature of war. Okay, so just war doctrine has been undermined by the changing nature of warfare. Like, for instance, in civil wars, low-intensity conflicts. Okay, you can barely distinguish between this traditional aggression, right? All these differences you can barely make in today's wars, okay? Including the US military campaign here and there. So it's kind of difficult to decide the campaign US made is kind of just war or another one. It's hard to make. Human rights. Human rights. The law of human rights is one of the newest areas of international law. Okay? Human rights law. You know, human rights has some again, different sources, but in a nutshell, you might want to distinguish between two kinds of different human rights. There are, you might want to note, negative rights. I'm on the page 266. Negative rights. What are negative rights? And what are positive rights? Negative rights are those rights including free speech, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, those things. Mostly civil, political rights. Those are negative rights. And positive rights are mostly economic and social rights, like health, education, good living conditions. Those are positive rights. When we institutionalize these intangible concepts like human rights, one problem we have about pushing for these human rights on a legal basis is that human rights have different standards from culture to culture. It's kind of important to first discuss where all these human rights come from, right? Because that is on page 265, where all these human rights come from in the first place, right? Did human rights come from religion? Did human rights come from culture? Some say human rights come from just Western traditions. Oriental, Asian countries, they don't even have these human rights in the first place, right? So are these human rights are really universal? For these human rights to become a legally founded basis, we need to first discuss this, right? So one problem facing many countries today, particularly when Western countries, particularly the United States, when they push for this human rights agenda, okay, human rights agenda, the problem is just this universality. We have this universality of these human rights issues. Because non-Western societies, they have different traditions. They might have different traditions. Human rights have evolved in such a way that some of the institutions are put in place, human rights institutions. Some are under the UN system, some are outside the UN system, right? You might want to note those institutions of human rights. Institutions of human rights. So in pushing for human rights agenda, Western countries, they resort to various institutions, right? International organizations, right? They resort to that. But the NGOs are playing over time a bigger role, okay? Rather than international government organizations, NGOs are playing more and more important role. Enforcing human rights, in terms of enforcing human rights, the most controversial international debate today is military intervention. Okay, in enforcing human rights, the more recent trend is to use military intervention, which is called humanitarian intervention, okay, in those conflicts, local conflicts. So this kind of humanitarian intervention is called R2P, responsibility to protect, R2P. This is an emerging international norm by which every country has responsibility to protect its citizens from genocide, ethnic cleansings, and wars of those things. Okay, so the UN specifically gave an order to every government. Okay, you have responsibility. Okay, if not, the implication is that if you don't do that, international society has the right to intervene. That's what R2P is all about. Humanitarian intervention. Humanitarian intervention. Which president, I mean US president, which US president is known as the one who is most active in promoting this R2P agenda? R2P agenda is casually known as the Clinton Doctrine. Sorry, the last one was crimes against humanity, right? R2P, every government has a responsibility to protect its citizens from genocide, ethnic cleansings, and wars of crimes against humanity, right? Crimes against humanity. These three things: genocide, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, right? Crimes against humanity. But like I said, these humanity, this concept, human rights, different countries have different standards, right? Countries like Russia, China, they have different standards as opposed to US and other Western countries, right? That's why the Security Council as a whole, they cannot, make a consensual decision in many cases. It's a very gray area, right? Gray area. Unlike diplomatic law, unlike previous other, even just war doctrine is very gray, right? But human rights is even more ambiguous. Right? What constitutes aggression? That arouses a lot of debate, many cases, right? But again, what constitutes crimes against humanity? Right? What constitutes violation of human rights? Again, it's not yet universal. Globally speaking, it's not yet universal. It's becoming universal over time. It's becoming, compared to the past, right? Because great powers, they exploit international situation based on these ambiguous agendas such as human rights, right? That's how Chinese view, that's how Russians view. And they confront US and other European countries' agenda. War crimes. So these war crimes are the issues of emerging importance. Emerging importance. Right. Because during war, it's hard to abide by these these laws, right? Wars are broken in wars. So when these wars are broken, how do you keep up with these laws, right? Where would you take these cases? War crimes, right? So what court was established to deliberate on these issues? ICC. ICC is exactly is about this issue. ICC. War crimes. It's about war crimes and human rights. So anyone can take cases to ICC. Anyone. Like I said, changing nature of war, right? Changing nature of war is making this field much more difficult and ambiguous. War crimes. When was ICC established? Was opened 2003. 2003. 2003, again in The Hague. Then the first trial was in 2008. First trial. It was about DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, conflicts from this country. Okay. And other regional conflicts in Africa. People who were involved, people who did bad things in these wars, they were taken to this court. And most important principle here regarding war crimes is that we have to limit the war to combatants. Okay, that's it. And we need to protect civilians. Okay. So those who are penalized in these ICC courts, they are penalized because they killed indiscriminately. Okay, they killed indiscriminately civilians and not only soldiers. Those are war crimes. America didn't like it, right? America didn't ratify ICC because America was at the risk of a lot of American soldiers maybe standing for the case, right? Because in these Iraqi war and others, Now, take a short break, then come back to discuss global trade. So talk about global trade. How many of you are interested in foreign service exam? Foreign service exam? Korean foreign service exam. No one? No one is interested? Raise your hand if you're interested. 2? Only 2? Are you interested in Korean foreign service? If it's possible. Okay. So only 2. 3. We have 3 here. Yeah, I think that's kind of something that you should, consider, because things are changing. It's not, past type of 고시 type of exam anymore. So you have some advantages if you do that. So this kind of class and this textbook, I think it'll give you some good foundation to begin with. This gives you good foundation. Then after you take this class, what you have to do is to add up. Okay? This is exactly what you are going to be tested. Same thing. But you need more depth, more elaboration. On each chapter, you need more elaboration. And given the trend of international relations, I think finance is important and climate change is important, which we are going to discuss later in this class. And climate change, energy is important. Those are emerging, newly emerging issues. Trade issues, relatively old. Trade issues that we are going to discuss now. Trade issues are quite well known and old debate. But emerging new debates are climate change debate or energy, those things. So you have to be broadly based on all this, each chapter, but then you should a little bit specialize in one or two topics. So this is, if you're interested, this is an important class. Now, global trade. I was in Dubai over the last several days. Dubai. First time to me, it was an interesting experience. As a professor, I was giving a presentation. Then I was given Mercedes-Benz and chauffeur from the airport. To and fro, two-way, from the airport to the airport. Then again, here and there we need to move from the conference hotel, So they had money. Clearly they have money. Very few people, only 1.5 million citizens. Only 1.5 million citizens. It's a small country, a lot of money, but then the entire system, the entire society is run by labor, migrant labor. You have all kinds of different people, particularly from South Asia. A lot from, looks like a lot from Southeast Asia. Then from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, these places. Only 4 hours from Dubai. 4-hour flight. So a lot of them. So the entire system, UAE citizen on top, then they give orders to these different migrant workers. That's how the system is run. And a very unique system. Very unique system. Very interesting country. But they're becoming more and more edgy because of changing energy situation. Shale gas and other all these different changes, rapid changes. So they are becoming very much like anxious to know what will happen. What shale gas means for their traditional energy. Shale gas is untraditional energy, right? New energy. And the challenge from this to them is very serious because their base is on just traditional, conventional energy. And then price-wise, those types of new energy America is putting on the market, is expected to put on the market. The challenge is so huge, so that they are requesting opinions from different people from all over the world. So I told them, so I was there, then I told them, they were, from royal family, they were all different high-ranking people. And I told them, look, what's going on in the United States, you never know. You have two sides to it. Some say it's a revolution, but other people say might be a bubble. So whether it is a revolution or bubble waiting to be popped up, we need to see, we need to watch. So I was, currying favor with this royal family a little bit so that they can have a good sleep. So that's what I do. I mean, going to different countries, I realize what they need. What they need is different. I mean, they want to hear, you know, U.S. shale gas revolution is really revolution that will sweep, you know, every traditional producer. That's not something what I have to say, right? These people. Now, global trade. Just two things. I want to do just two things. First, what you have to do today is first go over some of the conceptual paradigms of global trade. There are three perspectives on international trade. Okay, so we want to know what are these contending three perspectives on international trade. People have different opinions. Some argue that free trade is a good thing, right? And others say, trade should be restricted. Okay, free trade is not necessarily a good thing. Okay, for countries. So trade should be limited. Okay, free-flowing trade is not necessarily a good thing, right? And another, one more school argues that, well, trade, the way we have to understand trade is even more radical. Like, global trade is structurally organized. Okay, developing countries, developed countries, rich country, poor country, they are structurally developed countries, they are structurally designed to exploit developing countries. That's another view. So there are three views. So we want to get the gist of it. Okay, just briefly. Okay, what they say. Then having done this, three perspectives, then more important than these three perspectives is that we want to know where today's global trade is going. Where today's global trade is going. We are in the stage of WTO, right? We are at the stage of WTO. And usually WTO, these global trade negotiations are known as rounds of negotiations, right? Rounds of negotiations. There have been several different rounds of global trade negotiations. So the current round of global trade negotiation is known as Doha round. The most recent round of global trade negotiation is known as Doha round. What is Doha round about? So we want to know that. What is Doha round about? Because different rounds in historical stages address different agenda, right? So the current Doha round stage, what do they address at the current stage? More importantly, is global trade going smoothly? Is going okay? Again, there are different views, right? There are three different views. And which view represents better today's global trade? Right? Which view? Is it liberal view or mercantilist view or structuralist view? Which view represents better today's global trade? Right? Liberal view or mercantilist view? Mercantilist view is similar to realist view, right? Broad IR perspectives, we divide it into realism, liberalism, right? And what was the other one? Huh? Realism, constructivism, postmodernism, right? But IPE has different categories. This IPE, trade issue, has different terminologies. Liberalism, mercantilism. Mercantilism is similar to realism. About trade, we don't have constructivism about trade. You can apply that, but not quite. Okay? So the way trade is divided is liberalism, mercantilism, and structuralism. These three views. Structuralism. Structuralism is otherwise known Marxism. Marxism. So which view represents today's trade better? Right? That's the thing. Now, liberalism. Wow, I arrived at the airport 12 o'clock today, 3 hours ago. Arrived at exactly 12 o'clock. Then I got out of the airport 12:10. Got the bus 12:15. Arrived at Apgujeong 1:15. Then got a taxi here 1:40. Liberalism. Liberalism. Who are the big scholars in liberal trade theory? Liberal trade theory, the big scholars, you can't miss Adam Smith. David Ricardo. Adam Smith, David Ricardo. These are two big scholars in liberal trade theory. Otherwise known as laissez-faire policy. Laissez-faire policy. And the theory that encapsulates liberal free trade theory best is comparative advantage theory. Okay, liberal free trade theory is encapsulated in comparative advantage theory. That's what liberal free trade theory is all about. Comparative advantage theory. This is what comparative advantage theory is all about. Okay? When people produce goods and services, they give up something else they could have produced, okay? But that would have been more expensive to make than the goods they actually created. In other words, for instance, according to the law of comparative advantage, like for instance, Great Britain, they should import like items like food, vegetables and food items, food grains, rather than produce them at home. Okay? Great Britain is better off when they import items like food and vegetables, okay, rather than producing them at home. Okay? And because the cost of imports comparatively less than the cost of local production. Okay? Let other countries produce these things and exchange. Then both countries, they benefit. That's the law of comparative advantage. That's the bedrock assumption, underlying assumption of liberal free trade theory. Law of comparative advantage. The modern version of comparative advantage theory is Washington consensus. Okay? Modern day liberal free trade theory is Washington consensus. Okay, second, mercantilism. Mercantilism. Who are the great fathers of mercantilism? Alexander Hamilton and Friedrich List. Friedrich List, German economist. So they advocated protectionism, protectionist trade policy, or mercantilist trade policy. The whole idea is to protect your domestic industries, okay? Your domestic industries from imports. Okay, you protect infant domestic industries from imports. That's the idea. So it contradicts comparative advantage theory. No matter what, right? You need to protect your own industry, national industries. At that time, the US economy and other European economies, they were competing against English economy, England, right? So scholars like Alexander Hamilton and Friedrich List, what they were arguing was that, you know, the industries in the United States and other European countries, they were to compete on an equal footing with England's more efficient companies. Okay, that was the situation. So you cannot buy these free trade theories. Okay, if you follow these free trade theories, your infant industries, much more inefficient industries, they will die. Okay. So this kind of protectionist policy is differently called strategic trade policy. Strategic trade policy. So what are the tools to protect your infant industries, domestic industries? What tools do you use? You use tariffs, import tariffs, and subsidies. Right? These are just traditional methods you use to protect your industries.